Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Magic gameplay. This time around we are here for a little bit of Dark Elf on Chaos action in the Ash Plains. Obviously lots of hype for the new DLC, looking forward to all the new units, all the new mechanics. And so I've been trying to get back into the shape of things with Dark Elves and High Elves. Two factions I really don't play very much, but I'm really hyped for all the new stuff that we're getting. And for those of you who are watching or watched the Everchosen campaign, it's obvious we're getting some new mechanics, even for factions that didn't have them before. The Greenskins getting a new global WoW mechanic, similar, I assume, to the Murderous Prowess for the Dark Elves. So lots of cool tactical battle WoW mechanic, like what the Dark Elves have here. So definitely some cool stuff going on, and hopefully we'll get to discuss that at a later point. But either way, I thought this was a pretty fun match, and let's break things down. For my Lord, I decided to bring Morathi, so starting to get some practice with the witches. Obviously, she's no Hellebron, but we'll settle for Mommy Dearest. I did bring her fairly stripped down, except for items. I did bring Heartrender and Dark Sword as well as Enchanting Beauty to get those massive melee attack and melee defense debuffs. Wand of Coradon for single target sniping. It's gonna do a decent amount of damage against most lords and heroes. It'll do about 1,000 HP damage, so definitely decent if you can land the hit. If your enemy blobs up a unit, then it can do well there too. I did bring Deadly Onslaught, Soul Stealer, and then Power of Darkness to get some more Winds of Magic. Down on the ground, to combo with that debuff, we do have a Death Hag. She does, of course, apply poison. She applies the Blood Shield of Cain, which gives some physical resistance. She herself causes Fear and Terror, which is great against Chaos. And she does have the Chill Blade, which is -5 melee attack, -12% speed, and she can apply the Fury of Cain to any unit that she so chooses, which is a huge buff if you're in a drawn-out, tied-up sort of fight. If you're losing by a little bit, or if you need to adjust your you get a little bit more out of your unit, it can be a massive boost. For the rest of the army, we do have a Shadowcaster over here, Sorcerer of Shadows, on a horse. You can see it here on this poor little starving horse. Just look at it; it's so sad. But either way, she's in there. She's got her Enfeebling Foe as well as Occam's Mind Razor. So definitely hoping to get some extra damage out of my units. It's a great combo, honestly. Enfeebling Foe plus Occam's Mind Razor is just very, very powerful at nuking units down. Darkstar Cloak to improve power recharge rate. Obviously very solid, I think, choice just to get more magic. That's really my goal here. For my front line, 3 units of Hargoneth Executioners to outtrade with any nasty troops my opponent might bring. They should be able to crush through Chosen. They should be able to, though obviously they won't outtrade great weapons, but they can trade well enough, especially with the support from the units and here like Shades and Magic. 2 Dread Spears anchoring the flanks just to protect me. This build is definitely a little thin, so had my opponent gone with a Marauder heavy build, it could have been a problem, but as you can see, my opponent went with a very small composition, same with me, so it all worked out in the end, though definitely that's definitely one of the big disadvantages with this build. It's very hard to defend your backline. 3 units of Vanilla Shades are in the back, though, and these guys will be laying the smackdown on these Marauder Horsemen and throwing axes, just laying waste to these poor guys. You can see there the double shots pouring in. And the great thing about Shades is that they're decent in melee, and they can just shred through basically anything your opponent brings. They don't actually do more damage than Dark Shards per volley, but they fire faster, and it's just impossible to understand. Like, it's such a useful ability to fire so fast. It can make the difference between getting 1 extra volley and not. And that's, I think, really, really valuable. For my opponent's build, he is going, of course, you can see the 2 Marauder Horsemen already shooting at poor Morathi here, doing quite a bit of work. Of course, they are being debuffed by Morathi, but really the Marauder Horsemen, pretty solid choice. They have AP damage. Dark Elves don't have the best range, and these guys can definitely chip away at dragons. They can chip away at Hargoneth Executioners, that sort of stuff. For the rest of my opponent's build, some Forsaken on the flanks. The flank and span can go after my backline. They'll crush Shades. They'll crush Spears. They'll do a lot of work that way. 2 Chosen with Great Weapons in the center. So definitely a very unshielded front line. Very risky against Dark Elves who have a lot of shooting. But at the same time, if these guys connect, they will trade very well. Forsaken will trash Spears. Chosen with Great Weapons do outtrade Hargoneth Executioners in a 1v1. Archeon, the Never Chosen, is actually here. He has been chosen. He is here with Dorgar riding in. He's got a few spells here. He's got Kindle Flame, Cascading Fire Cloak, Flaming Sword of Ruin, and Burning Head. Of course, combo with Standard Eye, Foe Seeker, and the Slayer of Kings. So surprisingly, no psychological resistance, no Crown of Domination. So perhaps a little bit of a mistake, I think. Dark Elves can bring some Fear and Terror, but maybe not. I've forgotten to talk about how Dark Elves struggle to actually make use of their Fear and Terror causing units. In the back, a single unit of Chosen Halberds, providing some extra anti-large support, a unit of Chaos Knights with Lances there to interrupt the backline, and a Chaos Sorcerer of Death coming in with an interesting assortment of spells. Purple Son of Zerus, Soul Blight, and Spirit Leech, as well as Forbidden Rod. So definitely a little bit of an interesting composition there, but could be useful. Over here you can see we're trying to force these Marauder Horsemen off. I definitely do not want to be engaging them. And here's really the first mistake in the game I make, and that is deployment of my infantry. You can see we're kind of squaring off, but really what I should have done is shifted my entire line towards the left. With the Hargoneth Executioners here, it means that my opponent is kind of going to be able to overload this flank and sweep around. My Dread Spears, of course, can't hold up against Chosen. I really should have shifted more towards the left. But nonetheless, I didn't think about that at the time, and I'm immediately unloading on the Forsaken, who, of course, I feel are much more of a threat, actually, because I can tie down Chosen for a while, but Forsaken, if they get into my backline, it is going to be a very, very bad day for my Dark Shards and for my Spears. You can see here using the Spears to zone away these Marauder Horsemen, using a single unit of Shades to help zone them away too. And in the meantime, in the pits, you can see the Hargoneth Executioners piling in. The Chosen with Great Weapons have already lost. You can see about 2,000 HP down before they even close the gap on the Hargoneth Executioners, and that means this fight is going to be much more even, much more in my favor, and that is before we start putting in extra support units. You can see on the charge, the Hargoneth usually take an absolute pounding, but the Death Hag is in, and Enfeebling Foe Overcast does go down, which is going to last for an incredibly long amount of time, especially with the debuffs coming in from the Death Hag. Over here, the Spears are getting absolutely mashed, though, and this was a huge mistake on my part. Like I said before, these guys are just going to get smushed. I'm going to lose this flank incredibly quickly. The Chosen take almost no damage. Huge mistake on my part. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, I do get Occam's Mind Razor off. These poor Chosen are getting absolutely dumpstered, and you can see Marathi, I do actually dive her in here, getting a little greedy against Archeon, perhaps thinking that I could make use of that charge, but I do get hit by Spirit Leech. You can see Wand of Kraydon going down on the Sorcerer, hitting him for about 1,000 HP, though Forbidden Rod is going down and draining him as well. Over here, the Spears, the Hargoneth Executioners did manage to dumpster the Forsaken, but in turn they got shredded by Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes. The Forsaken, though, do rout, and so that's a little bit of a win, but unfortunately you can see the Hargoneth Executioners definitely not liking that axe play. And here, as I mentioned, this is where I'm really going to pay the price for my bad choices of deployment. You can see the Chaos Knights piling in. They've got almost 6,000 HP, 80 charge bonus. These Shades with their 30 armor are not going to like that at all. In the back, Marathi getting shredded by Archeon, though she did deliver quite a bit. And of course, Occam's Mind Razor going down there is providing a huge boost to her damage. But Archeon, nonetheless, has just so much HP. He's going to be able to zone her away pretty effectively, and I'm forced to flee. Over here, though, the Chosen and the Forsaken do get kind of caught up on the Death Hag. You get caught up on the Chaos Sorceress, I keep calling her Chaos Sorceress. I don't know why, but the Sorceress of Shadow and the Hargoneth Executioner are just piling in, doing their very best. But unfortunately, here in the back line, you can see the Shades getting run over roughshod, and unfortunately I didn't get some fire into them sooner. I really should have tried to get my Shades into a better position immediately, gotten some more fire into these Chaos Knights. Marathi does dive in, though. She, of course, does do quite a bit of work against Large, even without Occam's Mind Razor. She does have that bonus against Large, and these Chaos Knights are not going to enjoy her presence, though they are going to do some damage in turn. And of course, once these guys lose their charge, the fact that Shades have a decent sort of melee defense means that they'll be able to hold okay, if not amazingly well. And Marathi, of course, isn't there chipping away. I do pop Deadly Onslaught on her just to get a little more damage and try to chip these guys down a little faster. Unfortunately for me, though, it means that these three Shades are out of the fight, out of commission, and that means that my opponent is getting away with murder elsewhere on the map. I do pop Fear of Cain, though, on these Hargoneth Executioners, just piling through these Chosen with great weapons. With the Death Hag in there, with the support of the Sorcerer of Shadows, I can really debuff these guys, really help out the boys here, and we are probably going to be able to win in the long run, but it's still going to be a tough fight. Over here, the Chaos Sorcerer of Death gets zoned away by the Hargoneth Executioners, though not before dealing massive amounts of work. And you can see the Hargoneth Executioners now piling in against the Chosen with Halberds, trying to get a wrap on them, and they're going to time down, but unfortunately this does mean, unfortunately, with my opponent getting some Flaming Sword of Ruin buffs here, and he will be able to outtrade in the long run. The Chosen with Halberds, they just have too much HP right now. The Spears, though, still doing a great job zoning away these Marauder Horsemen, making them waste ammo. Forsaken are finally coming back into the fray, and my Shades are focused entirely on shutting down these Chaos Knights with lances, which means these Forsaken will be able to get in my backline. You can see my opponent doing a good job here, running roughshod over my troops, but at the same time I do get a Soul Stealer off on these Forsaken, on these Chosen, and that is actually going to be a huge boon, because these Dread Spears just came back on 16 miles. They're going to be able to start chasing these Chosen, and this is going to be one of the most ignominious retreats Chaos has probably ever suffered, as 16 Dread Spears begin to pursue a bunch of Chosen, and the Chosen have a lot more HP than these guys. Obviously, if they turned around and fought, they would crush them, but it doesn't matter. Over here in the pits, in the meantime, the Hargoneth Executioners still berserking, are tearing through the Forsaken, who of course are terrible against this sort of unit. And of course, with all those debuffs coming down, they really don't stand a chance. They get absolutely shredded, they get monster mashed, and they are going to rout as well. Which really does leave Archeon, who has absolutely clobbered Marathi. Marathi scraping away, for, just very barely making her way out of there. The Hargoneth Executioners dying to protect Mommy Dearest there, diving in to tie down Archeon, and doing a great job. But unfortunately for me, you can see the Hargoneth Executioners here, the last 4 of them getting run over by Chaos Knights. They're down to 1 model on 19 HP. These Chosen with Halberds still holding their own, and I really do need to shut down my opponent's Chaos Knights, and I do lose my unit of Hargoneth Executioners. They're definitely showing just how potent these guys can be, or how diehard they can be, how hardcore they are. When they decide to just hold their ground, they hold it, and you can see they're slugging out with Archeon here. They're not giving up, and you can see here I do use the Source of Shadows to start zoning these guys away, start chasing them off the map, and the spears are finally making their way back. My opponent did use these Marauder Horsemen to interrupt my Shades for a little bit longer, but it's really not enough. And now with the Chaos Knights do pile into the Shades, but I still have a few models. I've got 23 models here, I've got 24 models there, still about 40 models of Shades there. And the Chaos Knights with Lances don't do that great in sustained combat, so I'm able to start chipping away at them, especially with the Death Hag in there to zone my opponent away a little bit. And you can see, obviously the Argonauth Executioner will go down, they rout. What a bunch of cowards. Come on, still got 6 models left, guys, you can easily fight this. But, in all seriousness, they do rout. My opponent actually self-routes his Chaos Sorcerer here with Forbidden Rod. He's going to rout and shatter. Marathi just hiding in the air, cowering, because I don't want to be engaged. I need to keep that leadership alive because the fight is very pitched. And now I do start unloading on Archeon, because at this point I do realize that with the rest of my opponent's army gone, the key here is that if I can shut down Archeon and the Chaos Knights, the Shades can win the rest of the game. If I cannot, the Halberds will be able to get engaged, the Halberds will be able to tank through, and I'll be in trouble. But obviously you can always kite Halberds if your opponent has no way of shutting your range down. So we do focus fire Archeon. His leadership does buckle. The Death Hag is in there causing fear and terror. So once these Chaos Knights push past, they're actually taking a rear penalty, and they are going to shatter there, and that is going to be it for the game. So definitely a lot of fun there. Definitely a bit of brutal gameplay from the Dark Elves, and a very, very pitched match. So lots of fun there. So good game to my opponent's Swagger. As far as the builds go, I don't think this is the most competitive build. If you're worried about your opponent going wide, a whole bunch of Chaos Marauders could just swamp you with this. You bring a bunch of Chaos Marauders, you bring a few heavy hitters, and you can swamp this build. You oversaturate the backline, get on the top of the Shades, at least force the Shades off, stop them from shooting, and it's GG. But for more elite Chaos builds, this is very solid. I think if you wanted to make this a little more competitive, you'd probably throw in 2 Bleak Swords or something instead of the Shades, drop one of the Hargoneth Executioners for some Blackheart Corsairs, and that way you're increasing your width by a decent amount, and those are units that can deal with Chaos Marauders. Those are units that can deal with Chaff Infantry, and there's still units that can deal to an extent with, say, Forsaken and those sorts of troops. So I think that was if I wanted a more competitive build, but really with this sort of thing, you're in a decent spot. The Hargoneth Executioner is absolutely dumpstered the Chosen, obviously thanks to buffs. I made a huge mistake in my early deployment, and that nearly cost me the whole game because I just didn't get the correct engagement. The unit of Dread Spears here got absolutely dumpstered and destroyed and pushed off by the horde of Chosen here. You can see they racked up 92 kills, and that was mostly against the Dread Spears, who they just completely tore to shreds, and really, really kind of chased off. The Shades doing great work. Some of these guys were, I think, veteran up going in, but nonetheless, they got a lot of damage in against the Chaos Knights. They got a lot of damage in against the Chaos Marauder Horsemen, and good damage against the Chosen. Those Chosen were, one of the units of Chosen was down 2,000 HP before they ever reached my line, so it was a big win there. Yeah. Otherwise, for the build, the Dread Spears, of course, did their job. They zoned away some Marauder Horsemen, and what was basically a 3-to-1 cost efficiency there. They zoned away these Marauder Horsemen. This other unit got dumpstered pretty hard and definitely didn't do their job, but that was my problem with deployment. Had I deployed them more intelligently, they could have shut down the Chaos Knights or blocked them, or blocked the Forsaken, and I just didn't do that. The Death Hag, the Sorcerer of Shadows, of course, doing a great job. Death Hag and Marathi, of course, with those debuffs. The spells coming in from Marathi, nuking down my opponent's lords. Archeon and the Chaos Sorcerer each took a Doom Bolt throughout that game. Marathi, of course, dropping those debuffs, able to stop those knights, or help stop the knights from rampaging through my Shades. The Death Hag causing fear and terror on the Chosen, and dropping those debuffs, and the convenient rampages. And, of course, the Blood Shield, because unless my opponent was casting Flaming Sword of Ruin, it meant my troops were getting a lot more, were getting physical resist. And Sorcerer of Shadows, of course, with those debuffs, so comes Mind Razor, all that sort of stuff. So some good value there. For my opponent's build, I don't think it's actually that bad of a build. I think it's definitely a pretty solid build, especially given he took Archeon, who's a bit of a iffy pick. One of the caveats I would have is that he brought Purple Son of Zerus. I think a much better pick, or much better choice of weapon or spell would have been Fate of Buna. Nuking down one of the units of Hargoneth Executioners would have been much more decisive, I think, than trying to drop Purple Sons of Zerus on some scattered spears or Shades. And yeah, the Chaos Knights with Lances did a great job. The Chosen did a pretty good job, except for the unit that got horribly debuffed. The Forsaken, I think similar to my mismanagement, the Forsaken were somewhat mismanaged as well. My opponent they were getting shot up, so my opponent committed them against the Hargan Executioners, trying to sneak them around, but they got completely dumpstered for that. The Marauder Horsemen also getting zoned away was a little unfortunate. Had they been, I think, had my opponent just baited my spears out and then come back, they might have been able to turn the tide against the Hargan Executioners before they did so much damage. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent's Swagger. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below for additional content. As usual, guys, if you have comments or criticisms of your own, be sure to share them, and I'll respond as soon as I can. And I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.